The Harbor Stone Club dining room always smells like money trying not to smell like anything at all: polished wood, citrus cleaner, and whatever cologne costs more than my rent used to. Above us, a chandelier cut the late afternoon sun into shards that skipped across the white tablecloth like restless little secrets. The maitre d' called it the family alcove, as if that softened the fact it was a corner. A contained space. A place for private decisions delivered over expensive glassware. My mother, Vivian, sat perfectly angled beneath the light, the way she always did when she wanted to be remembered as the kind of woman who never sweats. My father, Grant, checked his watch before I'd even lowered into the chair, twice, then a third time like the minute hand was personally offending him. And my sister, Daphne, had her phone resting against her water glass, lens aimed with lazy confidence. Not hidden. Just assumed. "Sweetheart," my mother said, voice warm in the way it got when warmth was a tool. "We're so glad you came." My father's smile didn't touch his eyes. "We're doing this because we love you." I felt the chair back press between my shoulder blades like an instructor's hand, positioning me upright for judgment. Then my mother slid a small navy box toward me, velvet, precise, centered between the salt and pepper, as if the table itself had lines she was obeying. "A fresh start," she said. Inside was a one-way ticket. Departure, 48 hours. And next to it, my father placed a check like he was closing a deal. I looked at Daphne's camera and smiled anyway. Because they didn't know what was sitting in my inbox. They didn't know about the embargo. They didn't know the countdown wasn't to my exile. It was to theirs. If only I knew what I was walking into. They always tell you families have roles like it's cute. Like everyone picks a costume and commits for Halloween. In my family, the roles were welded on. Daphne was the heirloom, the one who looked right in photos, spoke in clean sentences, and collected accomplishments the way my mother collected auction catalogs, neatly, proudly, with receipts. And I was the problem that needed managing. It started early enough that I didn't notice it as a pattern until I was old enough to name it. When I was 9, my elementary school ran a science showcase the same night Daphne had her Rising Stars recital. I'd built a crude water quality tester out of aquarium strips, a jar, and a borrowed sensor from the after-school STEM closet. It wasn't pretty, but it worked, and Mrs. Callahan, who never praised anyone too loudly, said, "Elara, this is exceptional." I won first. My ribbon sat on the kitchen counter like a small red flag nobody wanted to acknowledge. In the car, my father glanced at it once. "You understand priorities," he said, like it was a compliment. We drove to Daphne's recital. My ribbon stayed home. By high school, I didn't even bother asking. My debate meets were too much when Daphne's lacrosse schedule got complicated. My summer research program was impractical when Daphne needed help touring colleges. When I chose environmental systems engineering instead of finance, my father called it a phase with the same tone he used for bad restaurant service. "Real careers," he said once over dinner, "don't involve mud." It was funny, in a dull way, because my best work always started with mud. At the North Harbor Institute, our city's private little jewel of a university where everyone's parents sat on someone else's board, I found my first real quiet. Labs are honest like that. Fluorescent lights hum the same whether you're brilliant or failing. Machines beep whether your mother is proud of you or not. That's where Tide Trace began, not in some glossy co-working space with neon slogans, but in a cramped lab with a temperamental oxygen probe and a cheap coffee maker that wheezed like it hated us all. Tide Trace was supposed to help small aquaculture operations, oyster farms, shrimp ponds, hatcheries that didn't have the budget for constant lab testing. Water quality changes fast. Dissolved oxygen drops can wipe out a week's livelihood overnight. The big industrial farms had teams and tools. The smaller ones had instinct and prayer. I wanted to give them prediction, an early warning system that didn't just report a problem after it happened, but saw it coming through patterns the human eye couldn't hold all at once. It wasn't glamorous. It mattered. Dr. Sato, my advisor, didn't hate me. That would have been easier. He just didn't believe me yet. When I brought him my first proposal, 18 pages of models, diagrams, and hopeful math, he tapped the stack like it was a polite inconvenience. "This is interesting, Elara," he said. "But it's thin. It's an academic idea right now. I can get field data." He leaned back. Field data costs more than determination. He wasn't wrong. And my family, as always, had money. They just didn't have it for me. But I had no idea what was coming next. The night that sealed my role in permanent ink happened at the Whitmore Foundation Gala, one of my parents' annual rituals where wealth wore costumes of generosity. The ballroom at the Montclair Hotel was a soft blur of champagne flutes and black fabric. A string quartet played like they were trying to be invisible. My mother moved through the room with practiced precision, greeting people who mattered, laughing at jokes she'd heard before, touching elbows like touch was currency. I came straight from the lab. I told myself it was fine. That being useful was more important than being polished. That maybe, for once, my parents would look past presentation and see purpose. My boots had a faint crust of dried salt from the waterfront tanks. My hair was pinned up in a hurry. My dress was simple, clean, and wrong in the way a truthful sentence is wrong in a room full of rehearsed ones. Grant's most important client, Howard Lexner, cornered me near the silent auction display. He smelled like whiskey and authority. He looked me up and down with a smile that was already a story. "Grant," he called over my shoulder, voice cutting clean through the polite noise, "I didn't know you hired the aquarium staff for your gala." The laughter came fast, like a reflex. People didn't even have to understand the joke to join it. They just had to recognize who was safe to laugh with. My father's face drained. Not with anger, worse. With calculation. With the quick mental math of how much this moment cost him in status. My mother found me 5 minutes later, fingers closing around my elbow with a grip that left small crescents in my skin. "You humiliated us," she said quietly, lips barely moving. "This will not happen again." I opened my mouth. Then closed it. Because what could I say? That my boots had kept me awake, that week, cleaning sensors and recalibrating a model that might save an oyster farm from collapse? In that room, it didn't matter. Later, as we posed for photos, my mother and father centered, Daphne angled perfectly, my presence tolerated like a smudge, my mother's smile never faltered. But her eyes flicked to my boots again, and I saw the decision settle in her like a pearl dropping into place. After the gala, it wasn't immediate. They didn't shout. They didn't punish me openly. They did what they always did. They performed. The intervention dinner at Harborstone came 3 months later, wrapped in velvet and concern. Back at that table, my mother lifted her glass like she was toasting a wedding. "Elara," she said, "we've talked to some people." Grant slid the check closer. "Seed money. Enough for you to reset." It was for $3,000. The memo line, in his tidy handwriting, transition support. Daphne's phone recorded the whole thing. The soft clink of glass. The small pause before my father's voice turned stern enough to sound loving. "You need structure," he said. "You need a city where you can start over. Somewhere less competitive." He meant somewhere I couldn't embarrass him. "Austin," my mother said, like it was a cure. "We found you a placement with Marlowe and Finch. Marketing support. Good people. A one-way ticket. 48 hours." I looked down at the ticket like it might explain itself. I could feel my heartbeat in my fingertips, steady and strangely calm. Because a different confirmation was sitting in my inbox. A different city. A different number. Daphne's eyes glittered with that hungry satisfaction she got when the family narrative was getting good content. She didn't even pretend to hide it. "Say something," she prompted, sweet as poison. My father waited. My mother waited. They wanted tears. They wanted collapse. They wanted a neat little clip that proved they were generous, and I was grateful. I let the silence stretch until it started to bother them. Then I smiled and said, "Thank you." My mother's shoulders softened. My father exhaled like I'd finally stopped being an inconvenient variable. Daphne's disappointment flickered. No drama for her video. I folded the check once, carefully, and slid it into my purse. The paper was thick, expensive, and untouched. Under the table, my phone vibrated, once, twice. I didn't check. Not yet. And that's when everything shifted. 6 months earlier, Dr. Sato demolished my first tide trace pitch with the calm precision of someone removing a tumor. We sat in his office under fluorescent lighting that made every surface look slightly tired. He flipped through my proposal without malice, which was its own kind of violence. "You have theory," he said. "Not proof." "I can build proof." He didn't argue. He just slid the pages back to me like they were a book he'd finished. "Then do it." I walked across campus through students celebrating finals, laughing with the looseness that comes from believing life is still wide open. My proposal weighed too much in my backpack for paper. My family's words echoed in my skull the way they always did when I was alone. Not practical. Not real. Not you. That night, I applied for the Kestrel Innovation Fund, the kind of grant people joked about like winning it was a myth. 12-page limit. One recommendation. Clean budget. I gave them 30 pages, for letters, and a full projection model that made my laptop whine when it recalculated. I didn't do it because I was arrogant. I did it because I was tired of being dismissed for not being neat. The acceptance email arrived at 1:47 a.m. $90,000. I called home from the lab because I was still young enough to want them to care. My mother answered on the third ring, distracted. "That's nice, darling," she said when I told her. "Listen, Daphne just got invited to clerk for Judge Ransom." "Isn't that incredible?" "Mom. The grant, I have to go. Your father's on the other line." The click left a small hollow behind my ribs. So I stopped calling. The Kestrel money went into development the way my blood went into my body, quietly, urgently. I hired a freelance firmware engineer from Halifax who had worked on marine instruments. Every contract stated my sole ownership of the IP. Every commit was time-stamped. Every meeting recorded in notes that lived in 3 separate clouds. It looked obsessive. It was survival. Then came the pilot. A small oyster farm on the northern inlet run by a woman named Maren Lyle who spoke like someone who'd seen storms and refused to romanticize them. "You messed this up," she told me on the dock, eyes narrowed at my equipment. "I don't get to pretend it was a learning experience." "I know," I said. "That's why I'm here." We installed sensors. We calibrated. We trained the system on local patterns. The water was cold enough to bite through my gloves. The sky sat low and gray like it was listening. Tide Trace went live on a Tuesday. By Thursday night, I knew something was wrong. The oxygen curves weren't just fluctuating, they were lying. The prediction model began triggering aeration at the wrong times, urging the farm to pump when it should have held, then holding when it should have pumped. The result wasn't abstract. It was bodies. Oysters gaping open in baskets like silent mouths. Marin called me at 2:06 a.m., voice controlled in the way people get when they're clinging to the last thing they can control. Turn it off, she said. Give me 48 hours. You don't get 48 hours when the tide's already turning, she replied. My crew is pulling dead stock right now. My stomach dropped through the floor of the lab. Every line of code I'd written felt suddenly heavy with consequence. I drove to the inlet before sunrise. Salt wind cut my face. Marin didn't yell. That somehow felt worse. You said you could see the future, she said, watching her crew work. Turns out you can't even see the present. I swallowed, tasting metal. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't pay my doc fees, she said. Then, softer, but I'm not cruel. Fix it or don't. Just don't waste my time. I went back to the lab with salt still in my hair and failure still on my hands. That evening, my father left a voicemail. He'd heard, through Howard Lexner, through a Marina board member, through whatever network my family used like blood vessels. Elara, Grant said, voice almost pleased, I heard about your oyster situation. Perhaps this is the universe telling you something. Call me. My mother texted, no shame in trying. Not everyone is built for entrepreneurship. Daphne sent 3 laughing emojis and, did you drown shellfish? I turned off my phone and opened the logs. For 3 weeks, I lived inside data. I slept in the lab chair for 2 hours at a time, waking with sensor specs imprinted on my cheek. I made coffee I forgot to drink. I ordered food I didn't taste. The world outside narrowed to a single question, where is the lie? At 2:31 a.m. on a Wednesday, I found it. A variable initialization error, small enough to hide, elegant enough to destroy. A single flawed assumption that cascaded into wrong predictions under specific salinity conditions. I didn't patch it. I rebuilt the model from the ground up. The new system didn't just correct the error, it learned from it. It began flagging its own uncertainty, prompting human review when conditions deviated from trained patterns. Resilience. Adaptation. Proof. Dr. Sato read my recovery report in silence for 7 minutes the next morning. Then he looked up and, for the first time, his expression changed. Bring everything, he said. Conference room. 9. In that room, with my charts spread out like confession, he made calls in front of me. He didn't praise me. He did something better. He vouched for me. A month later, I stood on stage at the Atlantic Aquaculture Forum with a clicker in my sweaty hand, speaking into a microphone that magnified every breath. In the 3rd row sat a woman with sharp eyes and a gray blazer, taking notes like she was reading a balance sheet. Her name was Celine Park. She was VP of Systems at Bluecurrent Marine. I didn't know that yet. But I had no idea what was coming next. Back at Harbor Stone, my father lifted his wine glass. To fresh starts, he said, like exile was a gift. I raised my water and smiled. Daphne's phone kept recording. Under the table, my own phone vibrated again, this time with a different rhythm. Not group chat chaos. Work. I waited until my mother excused herself to greet someone in pearls. Until my father leaned into a conversation about interest rates with a man who smelled like aftershave and entitlement. Until Daphne glanced down at her screen, watching the engagement on her clip like it was a pulse. Then I checked my phone. Celine Park, confirming embargo remains 9 a.m. Monday. Legal is set. You ready? Bluecurrent comms, final quote approved. Headshot received. Dr. Sato, proud of you. Don't let anyone rewrite your story. My throat tightened, not with sadness. With clarity. Bluecurrent's acquisition agreement had been signed 2 days earlier. Funds were in escrow. My new role, Director of Coastal Systems, was already written into a contract that sat in a folder on my desktop labeled Do Not Forward. The only reason my family didn't know was the one thing they'd never taught me: silence. I'd told no one. Not even Marin. Not even my closest lab friend. Because success had a way of attracting hands that wanted to claim it after the fact. Including, I suspected, my own family. I stared at the one-way ticket in the velvet box. 48 hours. The timing wasn't accidental. They weren't just moving me. They were securing the narrative before Monday morning. Because once my name hit the business feeds, once Bluecurrent announced Tide Trace publicly, the family story of Elara needs help would become a lie they couldn't comfortably repeat. Unless they got ahead of it. Unless Daphne posted first. Unless Grant emailed first. Unless Vivian cried first. And that's when everything shifted. I made my decision in the quiet space between my heartbeat and the chandelier's shimmer. I wasn't going to fight them at the table. I was going to let them build their version. And then I was going to let the truth arrive like a tide. Sunday morning, my doorbell rang at 9:12 a.m. Unannounced. Exactly on brand. Through the peephole, my mother stood in a cream coat holding a coffee cup like a prop. Her hair was smooth. Her expression was preloaded with concern. "Darling," she said the second I opened the door, "I thought you might need help packing." She walked past me before I answered. My apartment smelled like cardboard and laundry detergent. 2 suitcases sat open on the bed, filled with clothes I'd bought the day before from a thrift store and a discount rack, items chosen not for style, but for believability. My mother's eyes scanned the space like an inspector. "So overwhelming," she sighed. As if I hadn't coordinated an acquisition timeline, a relocation package, and the transfer of an entire software stack with more composure than she'd ever shown in the face of anything she couldn't control. She picked up the framed duplicate of my North Harbor diploma from a stack near the suitcase, ran a manicured finger along the edge. "You won't need this in Austin," she said softly. "Fresh starts mean leaving the past behind." The real diploma had already been shipped to Seattle on Friday. "You're right," I said, and took it from her. She opened my closet like she owned the hinges, pulled out a navy blazer. "This is too formal for Austin," she said. "You'll want to be approachable." The blazer on the hanger wasn't mine. It was a $17 decoy from Goodwill. "I was thinking the same thing," I replied, folding it carefully into the suitcase. My mother watched me pack like she was verifying surrender. When my phone buzzed, her eyes flicked to it, hungry. "Airline," I said smoothly, silencing it before she could see the preview. "Bluecurrent driver confirmed, SeaTac arrivals." She smiled, relieved. "I'll take you to the airport tomorrow," she said. Not a suggestion. A checkpoint. "Of course," I said, and let her believe she'd get her window seat view of my exile. After she left, I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at 2 boarding passes on my nightstand. Austin, departing 10:05 a.m. Seattle, departing 1:20 p.m. Different terminal. Different airline. Different life. I bought the Austin ticket with my own card, printed it at home, and left it in plain sight. A theatrical artifact for a woman who couldn't imagine I'd learn performance from her. I texted Celine, "I'll be in the air at 9 a.m. Eastern. Release hits while I'm flying." She replied, "Perfect. Stay off socials. Let the wave roll in." If only I knew what I was walking into. Because the wave wasn't just public praise. It was my family's second act. Monday morning, while I waited at gate C14 with a coffee that tasted like burnt resolve, I saw my father's email land in my inbox, forwarded by a sympathetic cousin who still thought I needed saving. Subject: Family update: Elara has chosen to relocate to Austin for a fresh perspective, Grant wrote to his entire professional list. We're confident this change will provide clarity and stability. Translation: don't hire her. Don't invest. Don't help. 20 minutes later, my mother posted a photo of herself and Daphne at a courthouse event, captioned, "Proud of my girl. Family first." I was cropped out of existence so cleanly you'd never know I'd been there. Then my boarding group was called. I pocketed my phone and walked onto the Seattle flight like I was stepping through a door they couldn't follow. At 9 a.m. Eastern, somewhere over the Rockies, the announcement went live. Airplane Wi-Fi loaded slowly, like it was savoring the drama. Then the headline appeared on a clean white page from a trade outlet called Maritime Ledger. Bluecurrent Marine acquires Tide Trace Systems in 8-figure deal. Below it, my name. My face, shot in a simple studio Dr. Sato insisted on, no chandelier, no pearls, no performance. Front and center. The article told the truth in measured sentences: the grant, the pilot failure, the rebuild, the adaptive model, the acquisition, my new role. At the same time, North Harbor Institute posted its own announcement. Bluecurrent published a press release with Celine's quote about resilient systems born from accountable engineering. My phone began vibrating so hard it rattled against the tray table. Texts. Calls. Numbers I hadn't seen in years suddenly remembering my existence. Daphne's name flashed 12 times in a row. Then my father. Then my mother. I didn't answer. Not because I was afraid. Because I was done negotiating my reality with people who preferred theirs. By the time we landed at SeaTac, I had 48 missed calls and a flood of messages that shifted in tone every few minutes: confusion, then congratulations, then anger that I hadn't included them. My driver waited at arrivals holding a tablet with my name, professional and calm. No suffocating concern. No verification. Just a service that assumed I belonged where I was going. Seattle's air smelled like wet concrete and pine. The skyline rose out of gray like a promise that didn't need to be spoken. In the car, my work email lit up. Bluecurrent General Counsel: we received a letter from Whitmore and Finch. They're asserting family, investment, and claiming a stake in Tide Trace. Attached PDF. My stomach didn't drop. It tightened. The letter was precise and cold, dressed in legal language. They claimed Tide Trace IP was developed while residing as a dependent under family support. They cited the $3,000 check, transition support, as seed funding establishing equity. Their demand: 30% of the acquisition. Or litigation. And that's when everything shifted. Celine called 2 minutes later. They contacted 2 board members, she said, voice controlled. They're implying you're unstable, that this is a family dispute we should take seriously. My mother, pulling strings. My father, applying pressure. Daphne, probably drafting a public narrative about ethics and family obligation. The synchronized performance from Harbor Stone, scaled up. I opened my banking app. The check image was still there in my deposit queue, photographed, never processed. Memo: transition support. Not investment. Not equity. Not Tide Trace. Their own handwriting betrayed them. I could hand this to legal and let them dismantle it. But I didn't want dismantling. I wanted finality. I tapped deposit. 30 seconds of processing. Deposit successful. I screenshot the confirmation with the timestamp and memo line visible. Then I drafted an email to my father's attorney and CC'd my parents and Daphne. Subject: your client's payment body. Attached is acknowledgement of the payment provided for my transition. Thank you for finalizing this matter. All future correspondence may be directed to my counsel. Attachment: the deposit confirmation. I sent it. Read receipts popped up one by one. Grant. Vivian. Daphne. Then I blocked each number in my phone with a calm I didn't know I could possess. The silence afterward felt like stepping out of a room where the music had been too loud for years. Later that week, at Blue Current's headquarters, I walked into my new office overlooking Elliott Bay. The water was slate gray, dotted with ferries cutting clean lines through it. Celine stood in my doorway, arms folded. "You okay?" she asked. I looked at the water and breathed in air that didn't belong to my family's ecosystem. "I'm better than okay," I said. "I'm clear." But I had no idea what was coming next. Not from them. From me. 6 months later, morning lights spilled through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my apartment and turned the bay into hammered silver. The city moved below like a system that didn't need my permission. On my kitchen shelf sat a mug Dr. Sato mailed after the acquisition, simple black letters, "Data doesn't blink." The phrase made me smile every time, because it was truer than any family story. In my hallway, framed under glass, hung a check. $3,000. Memo line, transition support. Guests always asked about it, confused. I told them it was the most valuable payment I'd ever received, not because of the amount, but because of what it bought. Distance. Clarity. Proof that I could grow without their light. At Blue Current, I ran a team that argued with me about models and sensors and calibration methods, not about my worth. On Thursdays, I mentored interns from backgrounds that didn't come with safety nets. One of them, a quiet genius named Priya, confessed in my doorway one afternoon, "My family keeps asking when I'll get a real job." I closed my laptop and gave her my full attention. "Sometimes," I said, "the greatest kindness you can do for yourself is to stop auditioning." She left lighter. On Christmas Eve, my phone showed archived voicemails, numbers unblocked but silent, waiting behind a wall I built with intention. I listened to one message from my mother once, tears, actual this time, pleading for a holiday reconciliation. Then I archived it again. That night, Celine and Marin and Dr. Sato came over. My living room filled with laughter that didn't require me to shrink. We ate food that tasted like something real. Nobody asked me to explain myself. Later, washing dishes, I caught my reflection in the dark window, same face they tried to erase. Still here. Still building. Outside, the bay held the light like a promise. And for the first time, the silence around me felt warm. Deserved. Mine. If you liked this story, feel free to subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next one.